Hello, it's me, Pip Critton, and I'm doing a microphone test for teen filmmakers. I'm sat here in my lounge at home, and I've got three cameras on me. So I've got an A camera, which is the tight shot, the B camera, which will show above my head here some of the microphones, and then right at the back we've got another camera which is recording everything that's happening, hopefully. So let me run you through the microphones that we've got. We have got a £600 microphone over there next to the camera. It's about 6 foot away. I've deliberately put it 6 foot away so that we can hear what it sounds like from a distance. And then I've got clipped onto me here on a radio channel, I've got a Sennheiser ME2 microphone. About a foot away overhead here we've got this little cheapy T-Bone microphone, which is about 40 quid to buy that one. We've also got a Rode M3. That one needs phantom power supply, and that one's worth about 90 quid. This one here is a Sony short rifle mic, an EMV NV1. That's about a foot away. That also needs phantom power supply. And there's also on the floor down there, about 3 foot away from me, exactly the same microphone. So we can compare this microphone with that microphone to see what the difference in sound is, just placing them at different distances from you. I've also got on the B camera, that's just recording the sound straight onto the camera. And the A camera has got this little 40 quid microphone fed into it so that we can hear what that sounds like. So that's explained the mics. So there's 2 being recorded on cameras, 6 mics going into this Zoom H6, and they're all set as close as the levels I can get them as possible. Some of them are ramped up really high because they just haven't got the gain in them. Before we go any further, I have a question for you. Which microphone do you think you were hearing in the introduction section? So which of the microphones do you think you were hearing in the introduction section? And I should point out there's been no post-production. They've all been leveled to an average of -9. What you were actually listening to was the cheapest microphone of all. It was the £40 Boya MY-MM1, which was fed directly into the camera, and it was about 1 foot away from me overhead. Let's remind ourselves what that sounded like, and then I'm going to play the sound from a duplicate camera. Both cameras are exactly the same, but the second time it will be just the sound as recorded by the camera. There's a famous seaside place called Blackpool, and it's noted for fresh air and fun. And Mr. and Mrs. Ramsbottom went there with young Albert, their son. There's a famous seaside place called Blackpool, and it's noted for fresh air and fun. And Mr. and Mrs. Ramsbottom went there with young Albert, their son. What an incredible difference in sound quality. An onboard camera sounds terrible, 40 quid for a little tiny microphone, and £10 maybe for a cable to improve the sound quality. There's absolutely no comparison, all without any editing or post-production. Okay, let's compare 2 professional Sennheiser microphones. We've got a £600 microphone, which is the Sennheiser ME66 with the K6 capsule, and that is about 6 foot away from me. That's the directional microphone. And then we've also got the ME2 Lavalier microphone, which is on my chest being fed via a radio transmitter. Can you work out which one's which? There's a famous seaside place called Blackpool, and it's noted for fresh air and fun. And Mr. and Mrs. Ramsbottom went there with young Albert, their son. There's a famous seaside place called Blackpool, and it's noted for fresh air and fun. And Mr. and Mrs. Ramsbottom went there with young Albert, their son. I wonder if you got it the right way round. The one that actually to me sounded worst was a £600 microphone. What I did do is I didn't point it exactly where it should have been pointed, and we picked up a lot of room reverb in it. The cheaper microphone, which was the one placed on my chest, sounded more deeper, a bit more resonance in it. Let's listen to them again, and I'll identify which microphone you're listening to so that you can hear the difference for yourself. There's a famous seaside place called Blackpool, and it's noted for fresh air and fun. And Mr. and Mrs. Ramsbottom went there with young Albert, their son. There's a famous seaside place called Blackpool, and it's noted for fresh air and fun. And Mr. and Mrs. Ramsbottom went there with young Albert, their son. Okay, so I think we're starting to see that it's not the cost of the equipment that makes better sound. A £600 microphone sounding worse than a £40 microphone. It's where you place the microphone, which is perhaps a lot more important. Okay, now we're going to compare a microphone placed in two different locations, and they're two identical microphones. It's a Sony EMV NV1, and they're short rifle microphones, professional microphones. One is placed 1 foot away, and the other is placed 3 foot away. I think you'll spot the difference in the quality of the sound. There's a famous seaside place called Blackpool, and it's noted for fresh air and fun. And Mr. and Mrs. Ramsbottom went there with young Albert, their son. There's a famous seaside place called Blackpool, and it's noted for fresh air and fun. And Mr. and Mrs. Ramsbottom went there with young Albert, their son. So hopefully we've heard the difference there between a microphone 1 foot away and 3 foot away. So getting it that little bit closer makes so much more difference than the cost of the microphone. There's two more overhead microphones to listen to. That's a £40 microphone and a £90 microphone. Let's see if there's any real difference between the two. There's a famous seaside place called Blackpool, and it's noted for fresh air and fun. And Mr. and Mrs. Ramsbottom went there with young Albert, their son. There's a famous seaside place called Blackpool, and it's noted for fresh air and fun. And Mr. and Mrs. Ramsbottom went there with young Albert, their son. By way of a recap and reminder, let's just compare again the best with the worst. There's a famous seaside place called Blackpool, and it's noted for fresh air and fun. And Mr. and Mrs. Ramsbottom went there with young Albert, their son. There's a famous seaside place called Blackpool, and it's noted for fresh air and fun. And Mr. and Mrs. Ramsbottom went there with young Albert, their son. Throughout this presentation, the narration voice, where you just see the caption on screen now, has been recorded with a large diaphragm studio microphone, and I'm talking about 8 inches away from it. Hopefully this demonstration will show that a cheap microphone placed well will always sound better than an expensive microphone placed badly. Thank you for your time.